What is up, good people of YouTube? This is Acid Root. So I'm going to review Kutt Calhoun's final album, his fourth album for Tech N9ne's Strange Music label, Black Gold. And this is the last project that he did with Strange Music as a whole. So he did 6 projects, 4 albums, 2 EPs. So I've reviewed every last one of these on YouTube now, so you can find all these. But I felt like reviewing Black Gold just because I've owned it for a while and needed to talk about it. And it's a pretty solid release. Definitely like the emphasis behind it. It's got some good stuff on there. But the problem with it is, at least one problem with it is, it's just the fact that Tech N9ne, Kutt Calhoun, and the rest of Strange Music is just very light on this project. This is not quite as much of like a home affair as it was in the past. Like Tech N9ne on the Blev album was on there at least 4, 5, or 6 times. Kutt Calhoun was on that album multiple times. It just doesn't quite feel as much of like a Strange Music record, but it's good to see that Kutt Calhoun can kind of stand on his own and do that sort of stuff. This is a pretty solid album. It's definitely a banger of a way to go out, at least on Strange Music, but it's just too bad that they didn't continue to collaborate in that type of stuff. So this is kind of the context about it. This is an underground release. This is one that was starting to build steam. It hit 120 on the Billboard 200, which is pretty good considering that Kutt Calhoun has never really had charting singles ever. So it's just kind of the concept that he was starting to build a noise for himself, but it just didn't quite get manifested properly enough. But this is still pretty solid. I mean, I would have to say, I feel like the popularity of Kutt is just kind of more of like a bubbler kind of situation. So it's just good to kind of get some of those moments and kind of see how he was handled back in those days. But unfortunately, even today, Kutt Calhoun is not really dropping that much music. I mean, it's been since 2019 since he's been around, but I still would have to say that there's a number of quality songs on this project, and there is some good stuff to be excited about. It's just kind of in a different context. Like Kutt Calhoun kind of comes off as a little bit jaded this time, not in the sense of being like a hater or something, but just you can tell that there's things that were going on in his life at the time that were kind of pissing him off. And when we talk about this album, you'll see some of the context of that, and it makes sense as it's kind of the concept. But so yeah, there were 2 singles on this project, and both of these are pretty wound up club singles. So the first single was Self-Preservation. And this is just an immediate kind of leery kind of club highlight. Definitely kind of real hazy, kind of looming, kind of belly kind of club highlight that just feels like one of the best beats on the album. Seven definitely outdid himself. Seven's a Tech N9ne producer, so Seven definitely outdid himself on this one. It was real litty. And Kutt Calhoun did a great job on the hook, and it just overall feels like, I mean, these are the sorts of cuts that Kutt Calhoun needed back in the day. This is exactly why I continue to ponder what would have happened if Kutt would have stayed with Strange Music even 3, 4, or 5 more years, something like that, because he was doing some boilers. I love the fact that Seven produced most of this whole album. A lot of these beats are pretty terrific, and it just was showcasing, just because like the stuff that was going on in 2013, I want to say in February 2013 when this project came out, it wasn't quite at the point where 2010's trap music had completely taken over with like Future and Travis Scott and Migos and Gucci Mane and some of those type cats, but it was still kind of, or some of this underground stuff was still kind of crusting from like the mid-late 2000s that like Tech N9ne was popularizing and that type of stuff. The people like Ritz, and it's too bad that Ritz wasn't on this album, but Ritz and Tech N9ne and Kutt Calhoun and those type people, and Kutt Calhoun, this is just kind of his last gasp of doing that kind of sound. And well, that's a great single, Self-Preservation. The second single is I've Been Dope, and this has label leader Tech N9ne on here. So this is the only appearance of Tech N9ne. You can barely even tell that this was a Strange Music album, but I did like Kutt Calhoun and Tech N9ne tag teaming the verses on this song like they did in their old days, kind of like Whoopi Goldberg, that song, and some of those type songs that just kind of went along with it. So there's just some good variations of that. It's just, I mean, Kutt and Tech N9ne go way back, so they didn't just have it be Kutt in the first verse, Tech in the second, Kutt in the first verse, Tech in the second verse, and Kutt in the third verse. They kind of just tag team each of the verses and put the hook in and did the same thing in there. So it's just pretty good to get that, just getting a bunch of lyricism from them. Really, it's just kind of a sad thing seeing Kutt and Tech N9ne kind of dissipate, just because they didn't go out on a bad note, but they just kind of quit collaborating. That's kind of the concept. But it's a nice kind of thumping kind of club beat, not quite as good as Self-Preservation in my opinion, but it's definitely like a nice kind of vanilla club highlight in a lot of ways. It's another solid beat from Seven. So I'm going to recommend the 8 songs out of 14 I recommend to you. So we'll talk about these. So the 8 songs I recommend would be I Been Dope, Self-Preservation, Baby Mama Drama, Jack Tripper, See What Had Happened Was, I Don't Like the Look of It, Same Thing, and It's Going Down. Some more club beats. I would have to say a really nice thumper of a strip club beat. This one's a real kind of slinky and just kind of woozy, hazy, kind of slightly drug-addled kind of beat is Jack Tripper. It's a real kind of nice, gnarly strip club song. I really like that one. See What Had Happened Was is a nice kind of club beat. This is kind of a gimmick song, but they did it well. I feel like Kutt did a good variation of a gimmick song on here. This is just, it's a gimmick song, but it's a club song as well, and this kind of works in a good sense of that. It has a nice hook in there, definitely a nice melodic hook that comes from like a old-fashioned song jingle. It's not row, row, row your boat, but it's just one of those kind of 1920s jingles or one of those type songs. I don't know what it is, like, yeah, something like that, but it's a nice one. Real nice kind of litty, kind of flossing kind of club beat in there. And another one that's pretty good, that's a nice club beat, is I Don't Like the Look of It, which kind of samples like the Willy Wonka movie and that sort of thing. So there are some kind of 70s samples in here. Kutt Calhoun does some samples that work pretty well, but I Don't Like the Look of It has like a real kind of pounding, kind of thumping, pounding kind of beat with a nice kind of leery kind of distortion in there in the verses that kind of sporadically happens. I like how that kind of went. It's kind of like a real hazy, kind of distorted kind of song. That's a nice one. Baby Mama Drama is a nice kind of relationship with women, with relationship with your baby's mother's kind of song. And this one's just kind of, I mean, it's not romantic, but it's just kind of more kind of pissed off with kind of sleazy babies' mothers who just want you for child support and that sort of thing. But it just kind of reminded me of Mockingbird by Eminem. Same kind of type song talking about raising a family and that type of stuff. But it has a really nice beat. It's just a real kind of slinky, kind of little bit bitter kind of song, but just the concept of it is just a nice emphasis of that. Normally, talking about like baby mama drama, I would almost think that it doesn't always mix, but I'm just glad that Kutt Calhoun I'm just glad that Kutt Calhoun did this song on an interesting beat and kind of made it with an actual bite rather than just put it on a crappy beat and kind of just have it be more about the emphasis of the lyrics. But it just works as like a good song. Definitely is kind of effectual. I mean, these sorts of songs, personal songs, I'm glad that it's always charming when personal songs can be pulled off, because Tech N9ne was a good example of doing personal songs. Eminem, of course, does them well. NF does them pretty well. But I feel like when they don't have interesting beats and when there's just a lot of ugly kind of interface about it, it just doesn't work. But I'm glad that Kutt Calhoun managed to do this. And he kind of does it again on like Same Thing. That's another one just talking about sleazy women that are cheating on you when you're trying to hook up with them and that type of stuff. The same women are doing the same thing. And this is kind of a nice kind of hazy, maybe not so much hazy, but just kind of mildly distorted kind of R&B type song. It has a nice hook by an R&B singer on there. I would say it's an R&B song, but it's not so much about getting the ladies as much as kind of being a little bit tired of what's going on and that type of stuff. So Kutt Calhoun doesn't necessarily do a ladies song this time around, but it's just kind of the effects of having girl problems in some of those type moments, as far as saying, oh, you know, these women are being sleazy and my baby's mamas are giving me problems. And Kutt Calhoun has a lot of baby's mamas. So that's kind of the effects of it. So just some of that type stuff. But it is interesting kind of get those moments because they're both interesting. I really like the kind of poppy, kind of airy, kind of breezy, airy kind of feel on Same Thing. That's one of the highlights of the album in a lot of ways. And It's Going Down is a nice club beat. This one has a nice little kind of sophisticated kind of blue blood piano beat on there. And old collaborators BG Bullet Wound and Snug Brim are on there. So it makes the song a nice kind of gangsta posse highlight. This kind of works extremely well. It's a blue blood song, but I like it. It's real sophisticated. Would have liked another song like this on here. And yeah, I think that about covers it. I think I talked about all the songs on here. So yeah, I'm gonna give this album, me liking 8 songs out of 14. I'm gonna give this album a 6.5 out of 10 because I feel like that's pretty rock solid. But to talk about some of the songs, the 6 songs I didn't like out of 14, I feel like I would have liked 501s and right signs, but I would have liked 501s and right sides, but that was just kind of a mood in a song that I wasn't quite vibing with. I mean, that one was a really kind of riding tonight, kind of ready to bang type song, really about to fuck someone up in that sort of sense. Just wasn't kind of vibing with the energy of that song. But didn't quite vibe with the energy of that song, and I kind of feel like Anthem had a pretty plotting beat. I mean, that one was trying to be Anthem was trying to be another pop type song, like same thing, but it just didn't pull it off as well. He even says in the song that he was trying to make this as an anthem for the strip clubs, but it just didn't really turn out that well. It kind of fell flat and was just not as good. I mean, I felt like definitely Jack Tripper was a good version of that, but it was just kind of a different variation for what I would have expected from it. Hello and Goodbye, That's My Word, and In They Honor are all kind of more uplifting and kind of more rosy kind of songs and more kind of straightforward, like kind of positive kind of songs I just wasn't vibing with. It's kind of odd to see Kutt Calhoun in that sense, just because I kind of like him on more of his slinky kind of crunchy club type numbers, but it just didn't really pull off as well as I would have liked it to. I mean, I like the concept of That's My Word, him just talking about staying, telling you to stick close to your word and take your word seriously because that's something important, but it just the production I couldn't really vibe with. It just felt a little bit too rosy and way too positive in a sense. But I think if it would have had a beat like Self-Preservation or like Baby Mama Drama, I probably would have liked that one better, something like that. And then I didn't really like the I've Been Dope remix. I kind of felt like the version with Tech N9ne was better, and I just don't know who any of these rappers really are to kind of say. It's just kind of it. I mean, I just felt like the original version was better on that. I just kind of felt like the original version was better on that one. So yeah, that's just kind of the concept of some of this. So it's mainly just too many. There's just a handful of positive songs that don't work, and then on top of that, there's just kind of some kind of plotting beats on here that are just kind of not quite as well put together. I mean, I definitely feel like Kutt has like some pretty rock solid club cuts on here, and he tries some new tricks that work, like Baby Mother Drama and like this rose kind of R&B songs from a different context, but I kind of feel like some of these just didn't. I kind of feel like some of these just didn't hit the mark. So yeah, I give this album a 6.5 out of 10. The social score I'll give a 7.5 out of 10, just because there's a number of cuts on here. The fact that there are a couple strip club songs on here, Jack Tripper, Anthem, songs like that, and See What Had Happened was in some of those, and just a lot of club cuts that actually do hit the mark. But I do kind of feel like the energy behind it I do feel like the energy behind this album is just different this time. It's just not quite as like I feel like the energy behind this album is not quite as frivolous this time. It just kind of feels more jaded and kind of a lot more just kind of like campy this time. I think that that's kind of the concept. That's the word I was looking for. Is Kutt Calhoun just feels a lot more campy this time, a lot more kind of not so much snarky, but just kind of in a more campy kind of humor and just that sort of sense, where it's just kind of this kind of more sarcasm this time than it was last time. And I feel like that's kind of the concept behind it. But I feel like some of the anthems of like feature presentation and raw and uncut, like Naked and like Get Cut and Whoop De Whoop and some of those type ones and Bunk Rock Bitch, I just feel like it's just not quite as just lackadaisical and just is not quite as lackadaisical and quite as frolicky, I would have to say. This is not so much about frolicking this time around. It just kind of feels a lot more of like a hazy kind of campy type attitude. And it's just kind of, you may notice that it's not so much like I care about the sarcastic tone, because a lot of the stuff that pissed off Kutt Calhoun I would agree with, just because some I can see some of the stuff being something that could piss a person off, but you just look after it. It's just kind of in the context that it just detracts, because there's not really songs that just kind of have like the frivolousness and just the feel good kind of vibes of like Bunk Rock Bitch or Whoop De Whoop or something like that. They're just kind of, regular kind of tunes. But that's just kind of, I mean, it's a minor kind of complaint about that, just because these are good songs and they slap in the club. But it's just when you start to listen in depth, to the lyrics, you kind of start to notice some of the complaints about that sort of thing. It was just kind of, I mean, for the most part, these songs slap in the club and that sort of stuff. But that's just kind of the context about it. So in terms of the future, like Kutt Calhoun has not put out a project since 2019, and with him not being affiliated with Strange Music anymore, is just kind of underneath the context that he kind of lost a label that could have housed his kind of underground music. And it's too bad because right as he was starting to blow up and starting to crack the Billboard 200 and stuff, he phased out and just didn't do it anymore. But there are at least two more projects by Kutt Calhoun I'm going to review, and then there's a mixtape also that I'm going to get to. So we'll start to get to some of these.